Hi friends, it's Emily with Emily T. Astrology. Welcome to Hermes Speaks. This is your weekly astro check-in where we explore the current quality of time and we listen to Hermes, Mercury, our messenger god of astrology. We listen to Hermes speak through the written word and bibliomancy, through story and conversation. Mercury's day is Wednesday, which is why this show airs on Wednesdays. And so I am looking at the week ahead starting on Wednesday, June 3rd, today, through Tuesday, June 9th. There's a particular story that is taking place with the transits this week that I would like to highlight that is bookended with Mercury transits. We also see this week the big conjunction of Venus and Jupiter that everyone has been looking forward to, our benefics coming together. And I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of where the moon is moving this week because I think it adds to the story unfolding during this week's transits. So we're going to break down these transits. And then, of course, we will bring in a pull from a book, some bibliomancy. Okay, let's get into the particulars. First things first. Today, on Wednesday, June 3rd, we have Mercury in the sign of Cancer square to Neptune in Aries from 4 degrees of their respective signs. That's the first bookend of our week. And then we move all the way over to Tuesday. On June 9th, we see the moon moving into Aries, conjoining that Neptune among a few other transits that she makes while in Aries. But we're going to focus on moon moving into Aries and conjoining Neptune. And then that same day, on June 9th, we have Venus and Jupiter together in Cancer at the 25th degree, coming into their much anticipated conjunction. And then by the end of the day on June 9th or into the wee hours of the 10th, depending on your time zone, we have Mercury square to Saturn from 12 degrees of Cancer to Aries. So let's start at the beginning. Mercury in Cancer square to Neptune in Aries. Mercury is our planet of the mind, of information processing, of communication, and of exchange. Mercury in Cancer, the sign of the moon, the sign that wants to feel nurtured and emotionally or somatically safe and secure, the sign of our bodies and our primary emotional needs. And then we look at Neptune. Neptune is the planet of unfulfilled longing, illusions, delusions, confusion, but also fantasy and vision. In the sign of Aries, a Mars-ruled fire sign that is instinctual, inspired, courageous, bold, impulsive, perhaps rash. What do we have here? These two planets coming into a square. Mercury, the planet that represents how we process information, wants to make sense of things in the mind and the intellect, but in the sign of Cancer is having to try to make sense of that, process that information on a somatic or on an emotional level. When it comes into a square with the rash and inspired, visionary, imaginative, impulsive Neptune in Aries, we might really be having ourselves filled up with an inspiring new idea. We might be feeling a new sense of vision or imagination, but there's a disconnect. We can't quite process that information because maybe we're trying to process it in our intellect when our bodies, our gut instincts, our intuitive knowing is at odds with that or can't make sense of it. Neptune is a planet of confusion. So perhaps our minds trying to make sense of something can't process it in our bodies, can't process it in our somatic emotional states. We might feel a sense of urgency around whatever this vision is, whatever this fantasy, illusion, dream. It's very passionate and exciting for us, but there's a lack of clarity. There's a disconnect. We can't quite integrate the image, the fantasy, the dream into our bodies, into our somatic and emotional states. The mind is trying, but there's confusion, there's lack of clarity. And that's how I see the beginning of this week starting out. with a vision or an impulse, a fantasy, perhaps a dream that comes in overnight, an actual dream that you experience that plants the seed of an idea, but there's lack of clarity. We can't grasp it. It's glimmers in the periphery. That's how this story begins. And then we're kind of floating throughout the week, trying to make sense of what this impassioned new dream is asking of us, is asking for us to comprehend. And then come Tuesday, we've gotten to the end of the week. What do we see? The moon herself, the ruler of that Mercury in Cancer, moves into Aries, and she conjoins that Neptune. So the moon, the planet who translates the light, the witness of divine timing. I love that phrase from my friend and colleague, Whitney Kranz. I've heard her say that several times about the moon. The witness of divine timing, the moon herself, the ruler of that Mercury in Cancer, moves into Aries. And despite the fact that this is still a square configuration by sign from Aries to Cancer, a square aspect which speaks to conflict or tension or dynamism or choice or action, because the moon is ruling that Mercury in Cancer that wants to make sense in the mind but is feeling a disconnect in the body and the emotional state, the moon, now feeling inspired and fiery and connected to the Neptune in Aries, begins to say, okay, perhaps we can come to an agreement. Perhaps we can draw a neural pathway that connects the inspiration and the instinct with the intuition and the somatic emotional state. So the moon moving in to Aries on June 9th, conjoining Neptune, is offering the initial sense of cohesion or coherence or integration in some way of our minds and our bodies, our instinct and our intuition, our emotional states, and our intellectual states. There's starting to be, in this storyline, some vista opening up about a pathway for integration between these. And then what happens later that day, dun da da da, Venus and Jupiter conjoin in Cancer, ruled by that moon that has just moved into Aries. And why are we all so excited as astrologers about the Venus and Jupiter conjunction in Cancer? Well, let's break that down. Venus is our planet of relationship, of harmony and beauty, and Jupiter is the planet of unification, cohesion, augmentation, expansion, and growth. When we put these two together, these are our two benefics, the planets in astrology that speak to or are assigned the subjective experiences that we have in our lives that we would tend to categorize as positive, as life affirming, life supporting, life sustaining. These two planets are coming together, both with high dignity. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, an honored guest, and Venus has some dignity through triplicity. She likes to be in the water signs. And so we have these two well-resourced, dignified planets that want to bring harmony, beauty, and relationship into unification, coherence, expansion, and growth. They are coming together in Cancer, ruled by that moon in Aries, in a sign that is about our emotional somatic states of being, about our primary needs, our sense of security and safety in an emotional sense, in a somatic sense. And they come together and infuse a sense of well-being into the Cancer sector of our chart. And on that same day, as the moon moved into Aries, yes, again, in a square relationship to each other by sign, but because the moon is ruling that conjunction and that conjunction is looking to the moon for guidance, now we see the clarity starting to come in. Now we see that there is a pathway for integration between intellect and emotion, mind and body, instinct and intuition, right? Inspiration and gut knowing, security and safety. You know, I'm thinking about, we all know when we are in a place of feeling unsafe, like genuine lack of security around food, food insecurity, emotional insecurity, emotional, being unsafe, emotionally unsafe in a circumstance. There's there's no room for anything beyond survival when we're in these positions, right? When we don't know where our next meal is going to come from, when we're in some kind of toxic situation where we don't feel emotionally secure, we're in a place of contraction. There's no way to then see the vision that Neptune is putting in front of us and actually go towards it. We're in a state of survival. That's all we can do. And maybe that's what we've been feeling. Man, can I tell you, I've been talking to people, friends of mine, people are going through it right now. People are going through it in a way that feels like everything is compounding on each other. It's like, what's that phrase? The total is greater than the sum of the parts, I don't know, I'm saying that badly, but you get what I'm saying. People are going through it, like serious, heavy things. They feel like they're just compounding on each other. People can't catch their breath, right? So maybe a lot of us have been feeling a bit like we're in that place of survival. Like, I've just got to get through the next day, the next moment, right? I'm like in a place of contraction, of grip. And that's maybe what's been happening here, is that we can see the glimmer. We can feel on the edges of our periphery the vision that Neptune wants to bring in Aries. It's inspiring, it's passionate, it's bold, right? We can see it, but we're still in a place of contraction, of survival. And we can intellectualize, we can look at the dream from an intellectual place, Mercury, and say, oh yeah, that looks great, but we're still stuck in this place in our actual emotional somatic states, our bodily states of being in survival mode. You can't go after the dream when you don't know where your next meal is coming from, as an analogy, right? So maybe we've been in this place. We feel like we're in survival mode. We see the vision in the periphery, but there's lack of clarity. We can't integrate the mind, the intellect with what we're experiencing on a somatic level. And then the moon moves in on June 9th into Aries, ruling that Mercury in Cancer. And she says, okay, we can start to look at each other. We can start to figure out a way. And then we get that benefic conjunction in Cancer, and they bring in an infusion of well-being. They bring in an infusion of a sense of security and safety in our emotional states, in our somatic states, in our bodies. And from there, we're starting to feel like we have a sense of well-being. We're starting to feel like we have security. We're starting to feel emotionally safe. And maybe our eyes are opening up and we say, okay, I've stepped out of survival mode, and now I can begin to look at the dream and see how I can actually reach towards it, because I'm not wondering how I'm going to get my next meal. I feel safe. I feel secure. And what happens then? For the end of our story of this week, the second bookend, Mercury in Cancer, forms a square to Saturn in Aries. Saturn, our planet of boundaries, of reality, of structure, of concretization, in that sign of inspiration of Aries, the fire sign. It's bold, it's brash. And Saturn says, let me help you make this real. Now that you're resourced, now that you're safe, now that you have well-being kind of infused within your body, in your emotional states, how can we look at this dream, this vision, and crystallize it, make it real, find some clarity around it? How can we also maybe temper it a little bit? Maybe we need to say, okay, this vision is beautiful, this dream is fantastic, and also, maybe it's a little unrealistic. How can we bring it down? How can we crystallize it into something that can be actualized, that can have a structure around it? And maybe it's a slightly smaller or a slightly more subdued version of the dream, but it's a more realistic one. It's one that we can actually go after, one that we can actually do something about, right? So this is what I'm thinking for this week, that we have an initial image, dream, fantasy, but there's disconnect between the mind and body, between our somatic states, our emotional states, and our intellects. We can't see it. It's unclear. It's foggy, and it's tugging at us. It feels urgent, but we don't know where to go. Then by the 9th, by Tuesday, the end of the week, that bookend, we get the moon coming in. She's able to talk with her planets that she's ruling over there in Cancer. We've got that infusion of well-being offered by the benefics coming together in Cancer. And then Saturn says, let me help you make it a reality. Let me tone it down. Let me make it realistic. Let me define some boundaries around it. Let's make it concretized and crystallized and real. There's clarity coming in. That's what I hope for this week. It's one version of the story. Of course, astrology is always multivalent. There are always many different stories that can be told with any given series of transits. This is the one I'm hoping for this week. So now we come to the part of the show where I bring in those added mercurial insights through the written word and bibliomancy. You know, I have a friend who's an Aries moon, an anaretic Aries moon, and she unfortunately is not Earthside anymore. She's been gone now from this plane of existence for almost 3 years. And I've been thinking about her a lot recently. And she randomly, out of the blue, sent me this book. She asked for my address, and about a week later, this book came in the mail to me. And I've just been thinking about her. She's been on my mind. And so I felt like this was the book that was calling to me, that wanted to be used for this week's episode. It is called Diana Herself, and the subtitle in there is An Allegory of Awakening by Martha Beck. And I opened the book and read this. Wait, is that a long time? The boar cocks her head quizzically. Yes, it's a long damn time. So, longer than 5 minutes? What is wrong with you? Diana yells. Sorry, I have a little trouble keeping it straight. Time is the most difficult part of this whole illusion for me to imagine. I mean, you have to admit it's weird. Minutes, months, don't you find it all surreal? Really? Diana shouts. Seriously? That's what you find surreal about this situation? That months are longer than minutes? Or that months seem longer than minutes? I can't quite track it. I get a little bewildered, Diana snaps. Welcome to my freaking world. The boar's little eyes open wide. Why, Piglet, you are correct. I am bewildered. Another bellow of laughter. You're bewildered and I'm bewildered. You know what that means, don't you? No, Diana yells. I do not know what that means. It means, Piglet, that the process has already begun. There's no way of stopping it now. Woohoo! Herself points her snout skyward and shouts, Destiny! Then she goes into another gale of laughter, the effervescent hoink, 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 echoing and bouncing off the silent hills. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I certainly hear Neptune. There's certainly Neptune in here, right? There's certainly Mercury square Neptune in here. Bewildered. They are bewildered. Time is an illusion that's difficult to comprehend. Months seem longer than minutes. And what does that actually mean, right? And yet, there's also this sense of destiny. The fact that both of these characters are bewildered, the boar says the process has already begun. The process of destiny unfolding, the unfolding of destiny has already begun. We are in it together. We are walking in our destiny, in our path, right? Okay, so what I get from this, the construct of time, right? Minutes, hours, days, months, years. It's a construct. It's something that we can intellectualize, right? It's a framework, and time itself is very Saturnine, right? Time is associated with the planet Saturn. So there's an intellectual construct that we have codified, that we have crystallized, that we have made up, right? It's arbitrary, really. And the characters here are like struggling to make sense of the construct. And I think that speaks to the Mercury square to Neptune that I was talking about. There's a disconnect between what our intellect is trying to do, what our mind is trying to do, and how it actually feels and seems to take root in our bodies. And I think that's what this is saying, that the more we try to force the construct, the more we try to force the intellect to make sense of the experience that we are feeling in our bodies, the more we try to force the intellect on top of the body, the emotion, the somatic space, the experiential, lived texture of our lives, the further from our ability to walk in the path of our fate, our destiny, our purpose, right? And so I think that's what I'm getting from this, is that we may feel that sense of confusion. We may feel that sense of bewilderment in the first part of this week as we're trying to make sense of a vision or a fantasy, or trying to intellectualize it. We can't integrate it in our bodies. We can't integrate it into our somatic intuition. But if we let that go and we embrace our confusion, we embrace our bewilderment, we surrender the need for it to make logical, intellectual sense, whatever it is, that's when we start opening ourselves to our destiny. That's when we start to walk along the path in a way that feels fated, that feels destined, that feels purposeful, if you're uncomfortable with those words, fate and destiny, but that feels in alignment with your purpose. And then Saturn coming in, Mercury making that square to Saturn concretizing it, like, okay, we've surrendered the need for this to make logical sense. And that's when the structure can come in. When we are fighting against the confusion, when we are fighting to force the framework, the construct onto a situation, that's when we are disconnected. That's when we can't integrate. That's when we're maybe stuck in that survival mode, right? When we surrender the need for the construct, the intellect, the logic to be imposed on the vision and the dream, that's when the new structure can take place. That's when the boundaries can come in and make sense. That's when we can crystallize around something. Only after we accept our confusion and our bewilderment can we be filled with our intuitive knowing. Can we be somatically, all this Cancer we're talking about, infused with a sense of well-being that is not something that can be intellectualized. It's a knowing. Cancer's intuition is like a womb knowing. You know it in your bones, and it's not verbal. It's just a knowing. So let us surrender to that. Let's stop trying to force the constructs that are arbitrary, right? That are only trying to keep the illusion in a box, right? Let's surrender that. And when we do that, when we start to just feel aligned and purposeful, then the new path forward, the new boundary lines that need to be drawn can start to take shape. The way shows itself as you take the step, right? You have to take the step. And then the path begins to form. Embrace your gut, your womb knowing, your intuition. Embrace the confusion. That's when integration happens. And that's when the new path will present itself, right? That's what I hope anyway. That's what I hope for y'all. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope you got something out of it. Please do like, comment, subscribe, share. Help me out if you feel so inclined. I love to know you're out there. I love to know that this is landing for some of you. So please chime in. If you have been looking to have a reading with a professional, come see me. You can go to emilytatomer.com if you'd like to book a reading with me. I'd love to connect with you. If nothing else, I hope that this week fills you with an infusion of the sense of well-being. I hope that for each and every one of you. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next week.